Let's have a look at why there are a growing number of articles talking about the falling value of the loonie and how it might continue to move in that direction and how that's going to affect our economy. More importantly, how it's going to affect inflation and future Bank of Canada rate decisions. So look, there are articles like this from Bloomberg very recently, and another one, this from the Financial Post. There's a trend. There are more out there. Now, what does this mean? Well, there are concerns about our economic situation, our GDP per capita, and more importantly, the upcoming US election. And if a certain individual wins and tariffs come into play, how that will affect the value of our dollar. Now, the question is, why does this really matter to us? And how does it affect inflationary pressures in our economy? Let's talk. So oil is traded in US dollars. So as our dollar devalues, it becomes more expensive to purchase on those markets. You might ask, why do we have to purchase it there? We make so much of it right here. Well, that's really a different conversation. As it stands, we still purchase a lot of our oil in international markets. So if it becomes more expensive for us to purchase, then of course our cost of transportation goes up, not just for our own vehicles, but also for commercial sectors as well. So it's an inflationary pressure. And again, it's not just oil that we import. We import consumer goods like electronics, clothing, food. What we don't really want to see, of course, is inflation in those sectors, but it's very likely that could happen if our loonie devalues versus the US dollar. Because, of course, everything's traded in the US dollar, becomes more and more expensive to bring across the border. Now, what about export? Paul, don't we export more than we import? Well, that is true. However, again, if a certain individual wins down south in the next US presidential election, then they may implement massive tariffs across the board. If that's the case, then it becomes far more expensive for that country to import our goods, which then makes our exported goods less valuable and more difficult to export. So this may not offset the inflationary pressures that we see with our imports. A little complicated, but that's the truth, and these are things we need to be concerned about. So if you made it this far, how does it affect the Bank of Canada policy rate? Well, look, if we start to see inflationary pressures half a year from now, a year from now, they may need to react differently than they have been right now. So, I mean, currently we're in a state where we're expecting further rate cuts for the Bank of Canada, their policy rate. And then, of course, that's reflected in the prime rate from the banks. So if you commit to a variable rate, that's great. You're going to see some wonderful decreases in your rate in the near term. That being said, a year, 2 years out, who knows? If we start to see a weakening Canadian dollar, it eventually will affect other aspects of the economy. And if it's an inflationary pressure that we're seeing, and if there's changes to the US government down south that create a tariff environment and hurt our economy, you might start to see different choices being made from the Bank of Canada in terms of their policy rate. So there's no guarantee that we're going to have low rates at this rate continuously for the next 5 years if you choose a 5-year variable. Just something to keep in mind. Now, on the fixed side, those are based off bond markets. It's really hard to predict how well that will work out. We're just seeing a lot of stability there right now. That being said, appreciate you watching all the way through. I hope this was helpful, and I'll talk to you soon.